Buenas todos. Thank you all for joining us today for the final piece of our program. I know we've had a jam-packed day with wonderful programming and speakers, but it's the best way to end day one of the Power Summit with the one and only Melissa Barrera. You may know her from her role as Vanessa in Warner Brothers' movie adaptation of Lin-Manuel Miranda's Broadway musical In the Heights, or perhaps as Lin in Star's critically acclaimed series Vida. Wherever you may find her, you'll know that Melissa is breaking barriers. She recently joined Clinique as a global brand ambassador, the first Latina to represent the brand globally. And with that, and without further ado, Melissa, I was sharing with you that my daughter was so thrilled to know that I was interviewing you today. You are such a role model for so many young girls around the country and around the world. I want to thank you for joining us. And before we kick off the conversation, ¿a dónde te encuentras? Where are you?
I'm in LA right now. I am here doing some little Scream surprises because Scream premieres in January and the trailer is launching soon. And I'm just doing a little bit of press and visiting LA because I don't live here anymore.
And so when you are in LA, what do you like to do? What's your advice for everyone?
Honestly, I'm such a boring person. I'm usually just working, and when I'm not working, I'm such a homebody. I just like to stay at home and like relax and watch movies and TV. And I like to have people over to my house more than I like going out. So just hang out in my apartment.
Well, and I think that's what folks are looking for right now, is more the sense of community, feeling that they have a connection with the people that they're friends with. So I totally get it. I understand. And I want to dive in because you've had such an interesting journey getting into Hollywood. You have mentioned in previous interviews that you've tried almost 10 times to try out, when you tried out for In the Heights in the theater with no avail. But then when it came time for the movie role, you got it. Talk a little bit about that journey and talk about this idea of keep trying and attempting until you actually break through.
Yeah, it's funny. My journey within the Heights is very, very long. I first saw the show when it was on Broadway, when it had just premiered on Broadway. I was still in high school and I fell in love because it was the first time that I was already a theater nerd and I knew that I wanted to do musical theater, but I had never, besides West Side Story, I hadn't seen any shows that I could clearly see myself in. And then I saw In the Heights and I was like, there's a place for me. There's a space for me in the New York theater stage. And I got so excited and I was like, that's my show. And then I came to study my university in New York, I went to NYU, and every time that I saw on Playbill, on Backstage is the newspaper that I would look for auditions in and open calls and all that. And I would see that they were holding non-equity auditions for In the Heights. And I would wake up at 5 a.m. to vocalize, to warm up my voice. I would go and I would line up around the block at Telsey Studios. Bernie Telsey is the casting director of Broadway. Mm-hmm. And it was me and 500, 600, 1,000 other girls that were, hoping for that shot. We would sing 8 bars, which is nothing. Mm-hmm. You can't, the frustration for me was how are you even going to tell if I can sing in 8 bars? It's nothing. It's 10 seconds. It's too little, but I would still try. I never even got a call back. I auditioned more than 10 times, way more than 10 times, never got a call back. And then 10 years later, I hear about the auditions for the movie, and I had just moved to LA from working in Mexico. And I was like, this is a sign. I just moved to LA.
When you say it's a sign, porque todas las Latinas, we believe in signs.
I believe in that. I believe in that. I see signs everywhere. Uh-huh. I definitely think that the universe speaks to us.
Yes.
We just have to be open to hearing those messages. Mm-hmm. And so I was like, it's a sign. It's perfect timing. I just moved here. If I hadn't moved to the US, I probably would never have found out about the auditions. Uh-huh. I now have an agent in the US that can submit me for it. So I was like, I need to audition for this. And my team was like, but do you sing? I was like, yeah, I went to school for musical theater. This is my thing. That's what I've been wanting to do.
My wheelhouse.
They were like, oh, we didn't know you sang. I was like, yeah, whatever. Just get me in the room. And they couldn't get me in the room because I was brand new. I was brand new to LA. Vida hadn't even started shooting yet. I had booked the pilot, but it hadn't even gotten picked up yet. So basically, I was the new girl with no credits, no experience, no nothing.
¿Cómo le hiciste? How did you do it?
I sent a tape. I recorded myself and I sent a tape in with
a VHS tape.
They call it a self-tape. It's just like you record yourself on video.
Okay.
I sang It Won't Be Long Now and Vanessa's Part of 96,000, and I sent it in. That was August of 2017. I had moved here in May of 2017. And I didn't hear anything back for over a year.
Okay.
But I heard that the movie kind of got stopped. It got stalled. It got removed from like the Weinstein Company because of the whole Me Too thing. And Lynn and Kiara were like, we don't want anything to do with that company. We're going to find a new home. So I called my team up and I was like, when they start auditions again, I want to go back in. And I'm going to use this time to prepare myself because I knew that maybe when I sent the tape in, I wasn't as good as I wanted to be. But I was like, this is the gift of time. The fact that the movie is paused gives me time to prepare. So I used that year and a couple of months to like take voice lessons and really get comfortable with the material. Because Lynn writes really hard songs for women to sing.
Have you said this?
Yeah. And so I used that time. And by the time I got called back in to audition, I had 2 seasons of Vida under my belt. So it was, I had shot the first season. It had come out. I was shooting the second season. And I was shooting the second season. That's crazy.
That's so cool.
And it was during the shooting of the second season that I got called back in and I sang again. And the casting director, you never really know with tapes if they see it at all or not. So I was like, they probably never saw it. It was like lost in the bunch. But when I sang, she was like, oh, wow, you're so much better than your tape that you sent.
Wow.
And I was like, oh my God, this time, like it just goes to show that you really just have to work hard and prepare yourself for the opportunities.
This is a takeaway.
Yeah.
What I'm hearing is that you tried, you failed, they said no, but you had something in you that you knew what you could do and you practiced.
Yeah.
And you worked hard. And I think oftentimes people think that there's shortcuts and there's no shortcuts. You have to make sure that, and I think sometimes as Latinas, the expectations that people have of us to excel is even higher. The bar is higher. And so we have to over prepare. And what you're demonstrating is that you had to do just that. And you had to advocate even among your own representation.
Yeah, you gotta advocate for yourself. You gotta believe in yourself. You gotta be your own biggest cheerleader and believer.
So I'm going to ask you, so what happens when those times when little doubt gets into your head? How do you work around that?
I feel like everyone goes through that. You have those little like vampires in your brain that are telling you especially in this industry, there's so much uncertainty. Even if you work, then after you wrap that job, that shoot, you can be without a job for years. Like there's no guarantee. And that can be devastating. Those in-between moments can be hard and you can fall into really dark places. And I've been in those dark places and I've been in like those moments where I'm like, I'm so unhappy during this in-between times that I don't know that it's worth it in the moments that I am happy and working. Like, I don't know if the balance out, like it's this, like, but it's those thoughts that like come into your brain in those moments of self-doubt and like, am I on the right path? Like, am I good enough for this? Am I good enough to get another job? And I feel like that's where having a really strong support system comes in, having a really good group of friends or a family that support you and that can like lift you out of those dark holes that you can fall into. And I've been very fortunate that I have a great support system in my mom and my sisters, and they believe in me when I don't believe in myself. And that's my superpower, I think, having them.
I love that. I love that. I think that's beautiful. And so you have now been in Hollywood. There was a recent study that talked about how there's just not enough representation in Hollywood of Latinos in general, even though we are one of the reasons the industry thrives. We fill the seats. in those movie theaters. There was a really interesting interview that Chris Rock did. It was about 5 years ago. No, it was 7 years ago, because it was when Obama was still president. And he said something really interesting. He's like, how is it possible that in the city of LA, that's 70% Latino, that they haven't been able to find a single Latino Steven Spielberg? And I thought that was it was so revelatory. What do you think right now of Latino representation? What can the community do? And what do executives need to do differently?
That's such a tough question, because we're a complicated community.
Mhm.
We're within ourselves. We're so diverse.
Mm-hmm.
We're not one thing. We're not one shade. We're not one language even. Like, we're not anything. So it's hard, because we get so little representation, that when we get something, we want it to represent us all. And we burden that thing with having to represent every single one of us. And when it doesn't, we criticize it and we hate on it. And it's kind of like this vicious circle that we haven't been able to break out of. And I feel like we're moving in the direction of more representation, because I can see it in numbers and I can see it myself. I've only been in LA for 4 years, but I can see the difference from when I first got here to now.
Mm-hmm.
And I feel so fortunate to be working. And I feel like I am proof that representation numbers are increasing, but it's still dismal. Like, the numbers are still not where they should be in the percentages that we represent in this country.
Mm-hmm.
And it's tough, because you're asking all these people in power that are still white. Most of them are still white. The people at the top are still white men, mostly, to like listen to the majority and to check boxes. And sometimes that's what they feel like they have to do. They just have to check a box. They just have to like fill a quota, but they're not actually trying to like give opportunities to talent. They're just like, oh, I just want to shut them up. And like, if I cast one Latino in this cast of 10, then that's going to be enough. They should be happy with that. And I feel like that's the mentality.
Mm-hmm.
And it's up to us to change it. It's up to us to like teach the new generations to like apply for those jobs, to like fight for their spaces, because the change has to come from the bottom, and then it has to like fill up the top.
Mm-hmm.
And eventually I hope that we get to a place where we feel represented appropriately in the percentage that we should be, in a percentage that reflects the world, because it's not that at all.
No, not at all. Well, and this is what's interesting, is that you have, and that's what's interesting, is that there is a generation that is hungry for representation and who consumes media like they would believe. And there is a disconnect. I often say that, it happens oftentimes in media, it happens oftentimes in government, that when they think of a Latino, they oftentimes think of our elders, and they don't realize that, the woman that may come and clean their house has 5 American kids at home, and that those American kids have aspirations and dreams just like the executives' children. And so how do we make sure that we open that aperture of opportunity? And so it leads me to this another question, is that oftentimes the way we make change is by activism, by voting, by participation. Would you consider yourself an activist? Why or why not?
I don't consider myself an activist, because I have too much respect for people that are on the ground and doing the work. I feel like if you want to get like super like figurative, everyone that has a platform is an activist in one way or another. If you're like speaking out on the things that you believe in, and because you have the ear of so many people and have the ability to like change their perspective on certain things, then that's a way of activism. But I don't consider myself an activist, because I feel like I don't do enough of that work. I feel like that title is reserved for the people that are actually, on the ground doing the dirty work.
I will tell you, Melissa, I have to tell you that I think, and this is what's so important, is that what you said there is actually what Voto Latino is about. We recognize that people can't do this all the time, but if they have a platform, if they have an art, if they can contribute, that's their superpower as well. And that's how we change the world, right? So it's not a matter of just the people that are marching, but it's the people of, I'm going to be your ally when you need us most, right? So I do think that, I will tell you, like, my journey was, this is not what I thought I was going to do. I consider myself an accidental advocate, but it's because I realized that it's all these 1,000 million people that have to, etch along their path in order for us to make change. And I think that's what's happening with your representation right now in Hollywood. The fact that you're there, the fact that you're telling your agents what you shouldn't be trying out for, that's activism, not just for yourself, but for the young women that can see you and say, wait, I can do that too.
Yeah.
So, I don't think you should count it
I
out.
mean, well, I will say that I do some activism.
Okay.
Like it's different. It's different to like claim the title of activist.
Fair.
Like recognize that I do some activism, and I'm vocal about certain things that I believe in very passionately about.
What moves you, Melissa? What moves you?
I get moved by the dreams of like young kids, mostly young girls of color, and seeing them come into their power, claim their voice, be so sure of like their value and what they can contribute to this world, and seeing, I feel like in this world sometimes as we grow up, we get so beat up and like we listen to all these things and all these limitations, and we kind of like, I had this friend that said that children, when they're young, you're not like even touching the ground. You're kind of just like floating above the ground. And as you grow up, you kind of like life kind of gets you down until you're like on the ground and you're like, this is real life. Yeah. But there's something about seeing young girls that are still floating, and the possibilities are endless for them, and they dream big, and I love seeing that because it gives me hope for the future. Like like the younger generations give me a lot of hope that we're going to be in good hands. And I love seeing, like Voto Latino, getting young people to register to vote, like teaching young people the power of having that right and claiming that right. I mean, I come from Mexico, and for the longest time, we didn't believe in our government. We still don't. Like as long as I have in my entire life, we've never like trusted the government for anything. And so sometimes what that translates to is at the time of voting, I'm like, oh, well, nothing's going to change. They're never going to help me. So I'm not even going to vote. And you think that you're punishing them when you're not voting, but you're actually punishing yourself because it's your right and your privilege to vote. And that's really, I think, what they want you to think, because that way they stay in power and they can keep bleeding the government out, and they can keep getting rich for themselves, and they can keep putting their friends in positions of power, and they can keep the communities of color marginalized and poor. And I feel like they're afraid of the power that our community has, but they're super smart in their strategy of like keeping us at bay and making us think that it's useless to even try, because they know that if we show up, they're done.
Right. Well, and Melissa, this is what it was so special of the last two elections. In 2018, here in the United States, young Latinos came out and voted in droves, and we changed Congress. It became the most women represented, the most Latinas, the most LGBTQ, the most young people. I mean, it was a powerhouse change. And they passed 400 pieces of legislation that included a woman's right to choose, that included that a woman should be paid equally as a man, that talked about climate change. I mean, it was a beautiful sonnet, so to say, to America. And then last year, Latinos, we did the same thing. And we now have a government that is not rounding up immigrants in the dead of night in the middle of neighborhoods. We now have a government that's actually giving women and families child tax credits, like $6,000 a year for a kid. And it's changing, but it only happened, to your point. We listened that we had to participate. And there is something that is happening here, that because people haven't been participating, their state legislators are passing really bad legislation that's hurting women in particular. And what folks don't realize is that when Texas gutted the abortion law, Mexico, literally like the same week, passed abortion rights. What do you say about that?
I'm so proud. I feel so proud
Mhm.
to be Mexican because of that. And I literally just moved to Texas. I moved from LA to Austin. And it's I have so much love for Texas because I grew up right across the border in Monterrey, and Texas was like my vacation spot, my go-to for school supplies and shopping, and all the long weekends and vacations I spent in Texas. So that it has a warm place in my heart, but I never woke up to the political aspect of it until recently. And it's shocking because such a large population of Texas is Latinos. And it's just scary to think that they would ban abortion and like have this like bounty of if you know a woman that's going to or has gotten an abortion and they give you 10, like it's just it seems barbaric and prehistoric. It's like, why are we going back in time? And the thing that people don't understand, because abortion is such a controversial issue, right? Because some people are very religious and it's like against religion, and no one has the right to end a life and all those things. And what they don't understand is that this is not about abortion at all. This is about controlling women. It's about not giving women right over their bodies. And is there anything, any law, any legislation, anything that tells men how to use their bodies or how they can't? There is nothing about that. This goes back to controlling women and keeping us down and keeping us submissive and keeping us as like in the back. That's what this is about. I am pro-choice because not because I would ever get an abortion, but because I believe that every woman has the right to decide what they do with their body, and every woman has the right to decide when they are ready to be a mother and if they want to be a mother, and no women should ever be forced to become a mother. I just think it comes down to basic human rights. It should be equal. Like it's just ridiculous. And if you saw the picture of like when they signed that legislation,
it was shocking.
All white men. And they were all smiling.
They were old.
It looked like something out of like a Jordan Peele horror movie. I was like, what is going on? This is crazy that people are still not opening their eyes to what this is really about.
Well, and you compile that along with the Texas ban on voting restrictions. We're making it really hard for people to vote. There are 250,000 Latino youth expected to turn 18 by the next midterm election, just in Texas. So when people say, well, this isn't really about Latinos, oh no, it's all about Latinos, right? Taking away Latinas who are of reproductive age in Texas, taking away the idea of when you can have family or not is not okay. The idea that you can't even vote those legislators out again because they're trying to take your vote away so you can't vote them out. Trying to do redistricting and saying, yes, Texas, 95% of the population growth was because of Latinos and people of color, but we're not going to give you any representation. Sin vergüenzas, Melissa. Just like, it's really shocking. So I want to ask you, so what advice do you give to someone that says, well, you know, politics is not really for me? What advice do you give them? Because we're not saying march in the street every day. I would say on occasion, but not every day. And vote. Well, what counsel would you give someone?
Oh, I mean, I used to think that way. I used to say politics aren't for me. I was like, it's too complicated. I don't understand it. I was never good in like government classes in school. I was more like a choir and drama girl. And I didn't understand that not getting involved in politics is like giving away some of my rights as a human and as a citizen of a country. It's like basically giving up on myself and my family. My existence is political because I'm a woman of color And I think most of the people that are going to be watching this are people of color, young people of color. And your sole existence is political. And there's so much power in that. I think I don't know by what year, but like Latinos are going to be the majority of the United States, like in less than 20 years.
Mm-hmm.
And for some reason, that's scary for like a lot of white people.
Mm-hmm.
And I just think there's power in people being afraid of you. I feel like it means something.
Good power. No, it does.
I'm like, I don't know why you're scared of me, but that means that I have power. I like to translate it to that. So I feel like it's so important to vote and to get your family to vote. To if you live in like a household with your grandma, with your parents, and they've gone through some stuff that maybe you haven't gone through, speaking to them, talking, bringing information into the house about what's going on with your representatives, about what's going on in your local government, educating the people in your family, getting them to register to vote is so important. It's so powerful. It's what's gonna lift our community, because we need to show up for ourselves. And I feel like if you think about the people, the elected people in the government that are making the most change nowadays and doing the most good are young people that young people have elected into those positions. There's so many dinosaurs that have held their seats for many, many years and they're doing nothing. So we need to fill those seats with people that actually care and that understand climate change, that understand the real issues that are going on at the border, that care about children, that care about gun control. It's like we have to take it into our own hands. We have to put those people in those seats. Otherwise, we're just going to keep going in this horrible.
I keep saying that there's no plan B for a planet, right? So, and Melissa, so I have to say that you just basically outlined a platform. Would you ever run for office?
No. No.
Melissa, I know that we're wrapping on time, so what is your sage advice for someone tuning in right now? They just came out of the pandemic. They might be trying to figure out what to do next because their life disrupted. What advice do you have for someone right now trying to figure out how do they find their true north, their true dream?
I say don't be afraid to try things. Don't be afraid to try different things and to fail. Don't be afraid to start over. And when you find that thing that makes you happy and that you love, don't let anyone discourage you from following that path. Because there's always going to be people that are like, oh no, but that you'll never make money doing that. There's not a career in that. And there's going to always be people telling you how to live your life, but it's your life. You got to remember, you're the one that has to live it. And you're the one that has to be happy. So, I mean, the example that I always give is there's so many people that go to college or go to school and like study something. And then they end up changing their minds in their 30s and like finding their true path and their true vocation and figuring out what they actually want to do with their life. And that is totally okay. There's no right timeline. So just don't be afraid to try things, experiment, and find what it is that you actually want to do with your life and that like you feel satisfied at the end of the day. You feel like you've done something that is making you happy. That's, I think, the most important thing.
I love that. I love the advice of there's no timeline. And because you're right, oftentimes we feel like, our abuelas have given us a checklist of what we're supposed to do by the time we're 27. It's like, I missed a couple of those.
Yeah.
But you're right, is listening to your voice, listening to yourself and recognizing there's no timeline. And Melissa, it's been such a pleasure having this conversation with you today. Thank you so much. And thanks for the Power Summit folks for tuning in. I told you didn't want to miss it.
Thank you, everyone. Thank you, Maria Teresa.
Un beso. Gracias. I'm incredibly grateful for your joining us today. I want to thank all of our speakers, including Dolores Huerta, Rashad Robinson, Christine Chen, and all of our panelists and partners. I want to give a special mil gracias to Vice President Kamala Harris for addressing our audience and for her continued advocacy in fighting for our country, for our community, for nuestra gente. And last, but certainly not least, I want to thank our audience and the Voto Latino Familia for joining us on day one. We will see you back here tomorrow at 3 p.m. Eastern for day 2, which will include special guests such as Stacey Abrams. Yes, that's Stacey Abrams, and Manny MUA. Enjoy your evening. Thanks for spending some time with us. Hasta mañana.